Whenever we experience something, we experience it in one of three ways, as either pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. If it's something we find pleasant, we tend to react with attachment. We want to hold on to the experience and prolong it, and have more experiences like it. If it's something we find unpleasant, we tend to react with aversion. We want it to stop, or we try to avoid it, or try to make it go away. And if the experience is something we find neutral, we tend to react with a lack of interest. We don't notice it, or don't care about it, or tune out, and look for something new and more interesting. Now let's look at what happens when we experience something unpleasant and react with aversion. There's a Buddhist teaching about how the way we react to pain often ends up making things worse. When touched with a feeling of pain, the untrained person sorrows, grieves and laments, beats their breast, and becomes distraught. And so they feel two pains, just as if they were to shoot someone with an arrow, and then right afterwards were to shoot them with a second arrow, so that they would feel the pain of two arrows. The first arrow causes us pain, and the second arrow causes us to suffer. In this story, the first arrow represents physical pain, but this first arrow can also be emotional pain, or the pain of mental anguish caused by thoughts we're having. And this first arrow is outside of our control. We can't prevent ourselves from having unpleasant experiences that cause us pain, but we do have control over how we respond to this pain and whether or not we get shot by that second arrow. So what does this second arrow that causes us to suffer look like? What are some of the forms that it takes? We can recognize that we've been shot by this second arrow through our body sensations, feelings, thoughts, and behavior. While doing the unpleasant experiences calendar last week, you learned to pay attention to your unpleasant experiences and then the body sensations, feelings, and thoughts that you had in response. And you may have noticed yourself feeling sorrow or grief, or lamenting or beating your breast or becoming distraught, or having some similar reaction that caused you suffering, in addition to whatever pain you were already feeling from the unpleasant experience itself. And so you might notice this second arrow in the form of body sensations. Your heart skips a beat. You tense up. You get a lump in your throat. You start to feel hot. You start feeling restless. Or this second arrow might come in the form of a feeling or emotional reaction. You start feeling anxious, or stressed, or sad, or angry, or bored. And remember that body sensations and feelings are closely connected and often go hand in hand. And so you might notice your heart skipping a beat as you become anxious, or tensing up as you become stressed, or a lump forming in your throat when you're sad, or you start feeling hot as you're becoming angry, or you start getting restless because you're bored. Or this second arrow can come in the form of a thought. This is terrible. What am I going to do? That's so unfair. Why can't I ever do anything right? And this second arrow can lead to a third arrow because we experience this second arrow as unpleasant, and so we get shot again. And this can lead in turn to a fourth, and fifth, and sixth arrow, and start a vicious cycle or pull us into a downward spiral, leaving us feeling distressed, distraught, and overwhelmed. And here's another way of looking at how that first arrow from an unpleasant experience can lead to a second arrow of aversion that leads us into a downward spiral of negative thoughts, unpleasant feelings, and uncomfortable body sensations that in turn cause us to be struck by more arrows. This second arrow also manifests itself in our behavior. When we experience pain or find something unpleasant, our first reaction is often to try to avoid this pain or unpleasantness. Distraction is a common form of avoidance, and it can sometimes be effective to a certain extent, but often by the time you try to distract yourself from something, it's already escalated to the point where it's so strong you can't distract yourself from it anymore. And even if you do manage to distract yourself from it for a while, as soon as the distraction's over, the unpleasant thought or feeling comes back as strong as ever. Another way we try to avoid things is by trying to block or shut out or suppress or control our thoughts and feelings. But this doesn't work because our thoughts and feelings arise spontaneously, and we don't have the power to block them from happening. They arise outside of our control. And the more we try to control our thoughts or feelings, the more we struggle against them and fight them, and the harder they fight back and the stronger they grow. An example people often give to demonstrate how ineffective thought blocking is to try not to think of a pink elephant for the next 30 seconds. So try this now. For the next 30 seconds, whatever you do, do not think of a pink elephant. So how well were you able to not think of a pink elephant? Most people find that the harder they try not to think about something, the more they actually end up thinking about it. And so if you've ever tried to control your thoughts or emotions by telling yourself not to think about something, or telling yourself to cheer up and not be sad, or calm down and stop being so anxious, you've probably noticed that it ends up having the opposite effect, and you end up thinking about it even more, or the feelings grow even stronger. Another way we practice avoidance is by trying to avoid altogether things we think could be unpleasant or cause us pain. But this limits the way we live our lives. If we're more concerned about avoiding the things we find unpleasant than we are about doing the things that are important to us and that we might enjoy and can make us happy, we may be able to avoid some of the painful and unpleasant things in our lives, but we end up sacrificing a lot in return, and we risk missing out on things that can make our lives more pleasurable, meaningful, and enjoyable.